Imagine you wake up tomorrow and every clock in the world is gone. No phone screen glowing on your nightstand, no microwave blinking in the kitchen, no watch on your wrist, no timestamp in the corner of your laptop, no schedule notification buzzing in your pocket. For about 30 seconds, you'd feel a strange, almost childlike panic. Then you'd probably look out the window, squint at the sky, and think, okay, it's morning. And somehow, impossibly, that would be enough. Because for nearly all of human history, that was enough. Before pendulums and gears and atomic oscillators told us exactly what time it was down to the millisecond, human beings lived inside time rather than against it. They didn't measure the day, they felt it. And something about the way we've traded that feeling for precision has quietly cost us more than we ever realized. Here's what almost no one thinks about. The clock is not a tool for telling time. It's a tool for controlling it. And there's a difference. For hundreds of thousands of years before the first mechanical clock appeared in a European monastery around 1300 AD, humans navigated time through an entirely different system, one built not from metal and springs, but from light, shadow, hunger, seasons, and the rhythms baked into their own bodies. Archaeologists have found evidence of early timekeeping stretching back at least 20,000 years. A carved bone discovered in the Dordogne Valley of France, known as the Blanchard bone, shows a series of notched markings that researchers believe track the phases of the moon across roughly 2.5 months. It wasn't a clock, it was a conversation with the sky. Ancient Egyptians built shadow clocks as early as 1500 BC, simple T-shaped devices that divided the day into morning and afternoon segments by tracking where the sun threw its darkness. The Babylonians divided the sky into 12 segments and gave us the concept of the hour. The ancient Chinese used incense clocks, carefully measured sticks of burning incense whose smoke told you not just what time it was, but carried a fragrance that changed throughout the day, making time something you could literally smell. None of these were precise. All of them were intimate. But then came a discovery that changed how scientists understood human time in a completely different way. Not the clocks humans built, but the clock humans are. In 1962, a French geologist named Michel Siffre climbed down into a glacier cave beneath the Alps and stayed there, completely alone, for 2 months. No sunlight, no watch, no external cues of any kind. He wanted to know what the human body does with time when you strip away every artificial marker. What he found disturbed him. His sleep cycles stretched and compressed in irregular waves. He thought he was sleeping normally, but when he finally emerged, believing he'd been underground for about a month and a half, his team told him the truth. 63 days had passed. His body had drifted into its own private calendar, one that didn't match the world waiting for him on the surface. When researchers studied his data, they noticed something remarkable. Even in the chaos, his body clung to certain rhythms. Temperature, alertness, hunger, these all rose and fell in waves that echoed, however loosely, the ancient patterns of light and dark. Siffre had stumbled onto the raw architecture of what we now call the circadian rhythm, the biological clock that evolution spent hundreds of millions of years calibrating, and it was calibrated to something very specific, the sun. So what did daily life actually look like before mechanical time took over? For most of human history, the day had roughly 2 phases, not 24 equal slices. You woke with light. You worked, hunted, gathered, farmed, built, traded, loved, argued, and played in the hours of sun. And when darkness came, you slowed. Fire gave you a few hours of warmth and dim orange light, enough for storytelling, prayer, reflection, and conversation. Then you slept. But here's the part that historians have found genuinely startling. You didn't sleep in one long block, the way we're told we should. A historian at Virginia Tech named Roger Eckert spent 16 years combing through thousands of historical documents, diaries, court records, medical texts, literature. In his 2001 paper, and later his 2005 book, At Day's Close, Night and Times Past, Eckert argued that for most of human history, people slept in 2 distinct segments, separated by an hour or 2 of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night. They called it first sleep and second sleep. In that middle hour, people prayed, had sex, visited neighbors, checked on livestock, interpreted dreams, or simply lay in the dark and thought. It wasn't insomnia, it was normal. References to this 2-phase sleep pattern appear in Chaucer, in Homer, in ancient medical texts from across the world. People didn't wake at 3 a.m. and panic that something was wrong with them. They expected it. The night had its own schedule, and they were fluent in it. Then something happened. In the 14th century, mechanical clocks began appearing on the towers of European churches and city halls. These were not small, personal devices, they were civic declarations. The clock tower didn't just tell time, it told everyone what time it was, simultaneously standardizing experience across a whole community for the first time. Before clocks, time was local. The moment of noon depended entirely on where the sun stood over your particular patch of ground. Two villages 20 miles apart might disagree on what time it was by 15 or 20 minutes, and no one cared. Then came the railways in the 1800s, and that disagreement became dangerous. Trains needed synchronized timetables, or they'd collide on shared tracks. In 1884, the International Meridian Conference in Washington, D.C., formalized global time zones, and the world's clocks were locked into agreement. The word punctual itself tells the story. It comes from the Latin punctum, meaning a point, a dot, a single precise location. To be punctual is to exist at a single, exact point in time. For most of human history, no one lived that way. Life was a wave. Now we were expected to be a dot. And in losing that wave, something in us got lost too. Sleep researchers began noticing in the late 20th century that rates of insomnia and sleep disorders were rising dramatically across industrialized nations, while remaining significantly lower in communities with less artificial light exposure. A 2015 study published in Current Biology by researchers Kenneth Wright and Celine Vetter found that just 1 week of camping without electric light, returning to natural sunrise and sunset cues, was enough to begin resynchronizing people's circadian rhythms. Their melatonin levels shifted, they fell asleep easier, they woke more naturally. The body, it turned out, hadn't forgotten its old instruction set. It was just being overridden constantly by artificial light and alarm clocks. Modern humans experience what chronobiologists call social jet lag, a mismatch between the internal biological clock and the external schedule imposed by work, school, and social obligation. A 2019 study in Current Biology estimated that roughly 70% of people in Western countries suffer from some degree of social jet lag on a regular basis. They are chronically living at odds with themselves. And the symptoms, fatigue, mood instability, difficulty concentrating, metabolic disruption, are so normalized that most people just assume this is what being an adult feels like. It isn't. It's what being an adult living outside of time feels like. There's a thought experiment worth sitting with. Imagine a version of yourself that has never owned a clock. You don't know your exact age in years. You are older than your younger sibling and younger than your parents, but the number 34 or 27 or 41 means nothing to you. You don't know if a meeting starts at 2:15 p.m. You know what happens when the shadow on the hill reaches the big stone. You don't experience Sunday differently from Thursday. You experience the full moon differently from the new moon. You are not racing toward a deadline. You are moving through a season. What would you worry about? What would feel urgent? What would feel worth doing with your one small share of days? The clock gave human civilization extraordinary gifts: coordination, productivity, scientific precision, the ability to build things across time that no single generation could complete alone. Without synchronized time, there are no train networks, no global internet, no space telescopes. We needed the clock to become who we are. But the question hanging in the air is whether we ever consciously chose the trade. Whether we understood, when the tower bell started ringing over medieval Europe, that we were exchanging one kind of existence for another. The people who built Stonehenge, that massive solar calendar erected on the Salisbury Plain around 3000 BC, they were not primitive. They were deeply, almost obsessively attentive to time. They just listened for it in a completely different place. Not from a machine on the wall, but from the angle of a shadow on the longest day of the year, when the sun lines up perfectly with the heel stone and the whole horizon seems to hold its breath. That moment of alignment meant something enormous to them. Not because a clock said it was important, because the sky did. You still have that instinct somewhere inside you. The part of you that notices the quality of October light differently from July light, that feels the pull of a full moon even when you're not outside to see it. That wakes sometimes in the deep quiet of 3 a.m. and lies in the dark and simply thinks, that's not a malfunction. That's the oldest, most human clock you have, and it has been running faithfully your entire life.